I am Alexandra Ward, 35 years old and founder of Summit Development Group. 10 years of sweat and sacrifice turned me from a small-town girl with big dreams into the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. When I received an invitation to my father Richard's 60th birthday, I thought maybe time had healed old wounds. Instead, I found myself directed to the service entrance, my work boots and jeans deemed too embarrassing for the front door. Everything changed when someone recognized me across the room and called out, "Madam CEO." Before I tell you how I went from the back door to the head of the table, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to join me for more real stories about finding your worth. Growing up in Riverdale was like being trapped in a snow globe where time stood still. Our town had once thrived with factories and small businesses, but by the time I was born, it was already fading. My father, Richard Ward, ran a small construction company that specialized in residential renovations and the occasional commercial project. We lived in a modest two-story house that Dad had renovated himself, with my mother Grace adding warm touches that made it home. My mother was the center of our universe, a kindergarten teacher who believed in me fiercely. "Alexandra," she would say, "you have an eye for how things fit together. You see possibilities where others see problems." When I was 9, she was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. Within 6 months, she was gone, leaving a silence in our home that seemed to echo through every room. Dad tried his best, but grief turned him inward. He worked longer hours, leaving me with neighbors or alone with homework and TV dinners. When I was 11, he met Diane at a client's dinner party. She was a real estate agent with perfectly highlighted hair and 2 sons, Mark and Tyler, who were 13 and 14. Their father had left for a younger model, as Diane bitterly joked. Within 3 months, they were married, and we became the new Ward family. At first, Diane made efforts, decorating my room in purple, though I preferred blue, making elaborate dinners, and scheduling family activities. But as weeks passed, the dynamic shifted subtly. Diane focused increasingly on her sons, and Dad seemed relieved to have someone else managing family life. By 12, I was spending weekends at Dad's construction sites, fascinated by the transformation of spaces. One Saturday, I noticed a mistake in measurements for built-in shelving. When I pointed it out, the foreman double-checked and found I was right, potentially saving thousands in materials. Dad smiled briefly, ruffling my hair. "Sharp eye, kiddo." But later at dinner, when I mentioned possibly becoming an architect, Diane laughed lightly. "Oh, sweetie, that's a tough field for women. All that math and technical drawing. Maybe interior design would suit you better?" Dad nodded absently, turning to praise Tyler for making junior varsity football. These small redirections became a pattern. When I brought home straight A's in math and science, Diane would comment that boys might find it intimidating. When Mark struggled with geometry, Dad hired a tutor, but when I asked for drafting supplies, they were too expensive right now. My 16th birthday fell on a Tuesday. I came downstairs to find Dad already gone to work and Diane rushing the boys to school. "We will do something this weekend," she promised. But that weekend, nothing was mentioned. 2 weeks later, Mark's birthday warranted a backyard party with 20 friends, a new gaming system, and Dad taking the day off. When I asked Diane about the difference, she patted my hand and said, "Men have fragile egos at this age. You are more mature." I started working afternoons and weekends at Harrison's Hardware. Old Mr. Harrison taught me about every building material in the store, from lumber grades to pipe fittings. I saved every dollar, planning my escape. At home, I became invisible, the quiet girl who cleaned her plate, did her chores, and disappeared to her room. My high school graduation ceremony should have been a celebration. I was valedictorian, with a full scholarship to State University's architecture program. As I gave my speech about building foundations for the future, I spotted Dad in the audience, checking his watch. Diane had claimed a migraine and stayed home with Mark and Tyler, though they were actually at a baseball tournament. After the ceremony, Dad gave me an envelope with $200. "College money," he said awkwardly. When I mentioned my scholarship, he looked surprised. "Well, good for you. But are you sure about architecture?" For years is a long time to waste if you change your mind. My buddy can get you a job at the bank, good benefits. I packed for college that August, fitting my life into 2 suitcases and a backpack. Dad helped load the car in silence. As I was about to leave, he finally spoke meaningfully. Alexandra, I know you have these dreams, but practical people like us don't aim too high. It saves disappointment. He patted my shoulder, then walked back inside where Diane was planning their anniversary trip. I drove away that day with tears blurring the road, but also with determination hardening in my chest. If being practical meant settling for less than I was worth, then I would gladly be impractical. State University was a revelation. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued ideas and ambition. My schedule was punishing: full course load during the day, waitressing evenings at a campus restaurant, and weekend shifts at a local home improvement store. Between classes, I would nap in the architecture building's study lounge, my drafting tools always within reach. During my sophomore year, Professor Eleanor Wright selected me for a competitive research assistantship. Eleanor had spent 20 years as an executive at Wright Development before returning to academia. She wore tailored suits, spoke with precision, and expected excellence. "You have raw talent," she told me after reviewing my first project, "but talent without discipline is wasted. I will push you harder than you think you can handle." She became the mentor I desperately needed. While other professors taught architectural theory, Eleanor taught me about navigating a male-dominated industry. "Never apologize for your ideas," she would say. "Make them apologize for underestimating you." Through Eleanor's connections, I secured a summer internship at Wright Development. The firm was working on a sustainable office complex, and I was assigned basic drafting work. But I stayed late, volunteering for additional tasks and studying the financial models behind development decisions. Many nights I slept on the office couch, showering at the gym across the street before anyone arrived. By the end of summer, the project lead had me presenting sections of the proposal to clients. My final evaluation noted exceptional initiative and business acumen beyond her architectural training. I called Dad to share this victory, but the conversation was brief. "That's nice, Alexandra. Listen, Tyler is moving into a new apartment, and we are helping with the security deposit. Things are a bit tight this month." I stopped calling after that, sending only occasional texts and obligatory holiday cards. Diane would respond with generic updates that never actually told me anything real about their lives. Graduation came with honors and job offers from 3 firms. Eleanor attended the ceremony, elegant in blue silk, beaming as I received my diploma. My family sent a card with a $50 gift certificate to a chain restaurant. I accepted a position at Greenfield Associates, a small struggling firm with a focus on sustainable design. The salary was lower than other offers, but the principal, Jacob Greenfield, was willing to give me unusual creative freedom. Within a year, my redesign of an abandoned warehouse into mixed-use residential and retail space won a regional award and brought in new clients. For 3 years, I lived in a studio apartment barely larger than my college dorm room, saving every possible dollar. I drove a 10-year-old car, bought clothes from thrift stores, and learned to cook inexpensive meals that would last all week. My colleagues invited me to happy hours and weekend trips, but I declined most social opportunities, focused solely on my goal. At 27, an opportunity appeared. A derelict warehouse on the edge of the city's arts district was available at foreclosure auction. With my savings and a risky bank loan, I made the purchase. Jacob was baffled. "Alexandra, that building needs millions in renovation." "What are you thinking?" I was thinking about transformation. Where others saw a crumbling liability, I saw soaring ceilings, natural light, and proximity to public transportation. I hired a contractor I had worked with at Greenfield, convinced suppliers to extend credit based on my reputation, and moved into a makeshift apartment in the back of the building to save on rent and protect against vandalism. 18-hour days blurred together as I juggled my job at Greenfield with overseeing my own project. I learned to negotiate with city officials for zoning variances, sweet talk inspectors, and manage construction crews who initially dismissed the little lady architect until they saw my knowledge of building systems. When the conversion was complete, I had created 20 loft apartments above ground floor retail spaces, centered around a glass-covered atrium that once served as a loading dock. The building was fully leased before construction was complete, with a waiting list for vacancies. The profit allowed me to repay my loans early and begin looking for my next project. That success became the foundation of Summit Development Group. I left Greenfield on good terms, with Jacob becoming one of my first investors. My company philosophy was simple. Find neglected spaces with good bones, reimagine them for community needs, and build with sustainability and longevity in mind. Over the next 8 years, Summit grew from a one-woman operation to a respected regional developer with 40 employees. We specialized in revitalizing struggling neighborhoods without displacing existing residents, creating mixed-income housing and community-focused commercial spaces. Our flagship project was the conversion of the abandoned West Side manufacturing plant into a complex including affordable housing, small business incubator spaces, a childcare center, and a community health clinic. The project required complex tax credit financing, public-private partnerships, and creative engineering solutions. When it opened, the mayor called it a model for inclusive urban development. Industry recognition followed, with features in Architectural Digest and Urban Development Quarterly. I was invited to speak at conferences about sustainable community-focused development. My personal net worth grew into 8 figures, though I still lived relatively modestly, pouring profits back into new projects. Throughout this time, communication with my family remained minimal. Christmas cards, occasional texts about major life events. I sent gifts for important occasions, college graduation checks for my stepbrothers, anniversary gifts for Dad and Diane. Their responses were always polite but distant. When the embossed invitation to Dad's 60th birthday arrived, I was surprised. It had been almost 5 years since I had been home to Riverdale. The invitation came with a handwritten note from Diane. "Richard would love to see you. We have so much to catch up on. You can stay with us, of course." I sat with the invitation for days, emotions churning. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to protect myself from inevitable disappointment. Another part hoped that time might have changed things. That success might have made me finally visible to them. Eventually, I RSVP'd yes, but declined the offer to stay at their home. If things went poorly, I wanted an escape route. As the date approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. Would returning to Riverdale as a successful CEO finally earn me the respect and recognition I had craved from my family? Or would I always be the awkward girl who didn't quite belong? The drive to Riverdale took 3 hours from the city, the landscape gradually shifting from urban sprawl to rolling farmland dotted with small towns. As I crossed the county line, familiar landmarks triggered a slideshow of memories. The ice cream shop where Mom would take me after dance class, the high school football field where I had sat alone during games, sketching building designs in a notebook while classmates socialized. What struck me immediately was how Riverdale seemed to be shrinking. Main Street had more vacant storefronts than active businesses. The manufacturing district on the east side, once the economic engine of the town, stood largely abandoned. Windows boarded and parking lots cracked with weeds. As I drove through downtown, a series of bright blue billboards caught my attention. Crestview Properties, building Riverdale's future. They showed glossy renderings of generic retail spaces and luxury condominiums that looked completely out of place in this modest town. I recognized the development style: maximize profit with minimal investment, pricing out locals and bringing in national chains to replace family businesses. I checked into the Riverdale Inn, a Victorian-era bed and breakfast that had been the town's premier accommodation for generations. Mrs. Peterson, the owner, didn't recognize me at first. When I gave my name, her eyes widened. "Alexandra Ward? Little Lexi? My goodness, you've grown into such a lovely woman. Your father mentioned you were coming for his birthday, though I was surprised you didn't want to stay at the family home." I smiled noncommittally. It's nice to have my own space. How has business been, Mrs. Peterson? Her expression clouded. Challenging, dear. Since the factory's closed, tourism is our main hope. But with Crestview buying up downtown and raising rents, many shops tourists would visit are closing. They've approached me about selling the inn 3 times. After settling into my room, I called Dad to let him know I had arrived. His voice sounded older, more hesitant than I remembered. Alexandra. Good, you made it. Diane has planned quite an event for tomorrow night. Important people will be there, the mayor, business associates, friends from the country club. I'm looking forward to seeing you, Dad, I said, trying to inject warmth into my voice. Yes, well, Diane suggested you might want to go shopping before the party. There's a new boutique at the mall. More appropriate attire, you know. He cleared his throat awkwardly. I brought something suitable, I replied, though in truth, I hadn't given much thought to what I would wear. My wardrobe consisted primarily of well-made, but practical business clothes. After hanging up, I decided to walk downtown, reacquainting myself with the town I had once been so desperate to escape. At Corner Cup Coffee, I ran into Jessica Miller, who had been kind to me in high school when few others were. Alexandra Ward? Oh my God. She embraced me enthusiastically. When Tommy said he thought he saw you checking into the inn, I didn't believe him. What are you doing back in Riverdale? My dad's birthday, I explained, accepting her invitation to sit. And what are you up to these days? Last I heard, you were off to college on some scholarship? When I told her about Summit Development, her jaw literally dropped. You own a company? With employees and everything? That's amazing. Her reaction was so genuine, so different from my family's indifference that I found myself warming to her immediately. Jessica managed the local library and was concerned about its future. Crestview wants to renovate the building into a restaurant. They're pressuring the town council to relocate us to a smaller space in the strip mall. Throughout our conversation, Jessica kept marveling at my transformation. I always knew you were smart, but this is incredible. Your family must be so proud. I changed the subject. Before heading back to the inn, I stopped at Harrison's Hardware, now run by Mr. Harrison's grandson, Brian. The store looked much the same, though the inventory seemed sparser. Miss Ward, Grandpa told me you might be visiting. He's in Florida now, but he still talks about his star employee. Brian's friendly welcome gave way to business concerns. This Crestview situation has everyone scared. They're buying buildings and doubling rents overnight. Talking about revitalization, but really just wanting to flip properties for a quick profit. His words stirred my professional interest. How much of downtown have they acquired? About 40% so far. They're particularly interested in the old manufacturing district. There's talk about luxury condos where the textile factory used to be. On impulse, I asked Brian if he could show me some of the properties in question. He closed the shop early, and we spent the afternoon touring vacant buildings that had once been Riverdale's economic center. The structures were solid, brick construction from the early 20th century with good bones and architectural details that modern buildings lacked. At the abandoned textile factory, I found myself wading through puddles in the loading dock area, examining the structural supports and imagining possibilities. My boots and jeans were soon mud-splattered, but I was too engrossed to care. This property had immense potential for true community-focused redevelopment, affordable housing, workspaces for local artisans, perhaps a public market. By the time we finished, it was late afternoon, and I realized I had just hours before Dad's party. As Brian dropped me at the inn, he asked casually, "So, are you just visiting? Or might Summit Development have interest in Riverdale?" "It's certainly worth considering," I replied, my mind already calculating acquisition costs and renovation estimates. Back in my room, I faced a dilemma. There wasn't time to properly shower, change, and make it to the party on time. I could arrive late but perfectly polished, or on time but slightly disheveled. I opted for punctuality, quickly washing my face, reapplying minimal makeup, and changing into a simple black dress I had packed. My boots, however, were beyond saving. Still damp and mud-crusted at the edges. My only other footwear was a pair of comfortable flats that hardly matched the occasion. as I drove to my childhood home. Now a much grander version after years of renovation, I debated whether to mention my professional success. Part of me wanted to arrive humbly, to see if they would value me without the trappings of achievement. Another part wanted vindication, to show them exactly what they had dismissed. In the end, time made the decision for me. There was no opportunity to stop for new shoes, no chance to craft a perfect entrance. I would arrive as I was, Alexandra Ward, CEO of Summit Development, with mud-spattered boots beneath my simple black dress. The Ward family home had transformed since my childhood. What had once been a modest two-story house was now an expansive property with professionally landscaped grounds, a circular driveway filled with luxury vehicles, and warm lights spilling from large windows. Valet attendants in vests directed traffic while caterers bustled through a side entrance. I parked my rental car and approached the front door, gift bag in hand containing an architectural model I had commissioned, a detailed replica of Dad's first successful building project. My stomach knotted with nerves, but I straightened my shoulders and rang the bell. The door swung open to reveal Diane, hair perfectly styled and wearing a designer dress I recognized from a recent fashion magazine. Her smile of greeting froze as her eyes traveled from my face down to my boots. "Alexandra, you came directly from somewhere?" Her voice carried that familiar note of disapproval thinly veiled as concern. "I was looking at some properties downtown," I explained. "Lost track of time." Diane's smile remained fixed, but her eyes darted nervously to the well-dressed guests visible in the foyer behind her. She stepped outside, partially closing the door. "The service entrance is around back. We can't have guests seeing you like this." She spoke in a hushed, urgent tone. "The caterers can give you a towel for those boots. Once you're presentable, you can join the party properly." The request struck me like a physical blow. Service entrance? As if I were a delivery person rather than family? But years of conditioning kicked in before I could protest. I nodded mutely and walked around the side of the house, past manicured shrubs and garden lights, to a plain door where staff in black and white uniforms were carrying trays. Inside the kitchen, busy caterers barely glanced at me. I found the powder room off the pantry and locked myself inside, leaning against the door as emotion threatened to overwhelm me. Through the thin walls, I could hear Diane's voice. "I cannot believe she showed up looking like that. Did you see those boots? Like she came straight from a construction site." My father's deeper tone responded. "What did you expect me to do? She's always been difficult. Just keep her away from the important guests until she cleans up." Their voices faded as they moved away, but the damage was done. I stared at my reflection in the small mirror, professional woman on top, mud-splattered disaster below. For a moment, I considered leaving, driving back to the inn and flying home first thing tomorrow. But that would mean letting them win, confirming their belief that I didn't belong in their polished world. Instead, I did what I could with paper towels and hand soap, removing the worst of the mud from my boots. I refreshed my lipstick, straightened my dress, and squared my shoulders before stepping back into the kitchen and finding my way to the main party. The great room was filled with Riverdale's elite, business owners, local politicians, country club members. Crystal chandeliers illuminated a space that had once been our simple living room. A jazz quartet played in the corner while uniformed servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I spotted Dad immediately, distinguished in a tailored suit, silver hair making him look like a movie version of a successful businessman. He was engaged in animated conversation with a group of men, including Mayor Roberts. Diane hovered nearby, the perfect hostess, laughing at appropriate moments and ensuring glasses remained full. When Dad glanced my way, I raised my hand in greeting, but his eyes slid past me as if I were a stranger. He whispered something to Diane, who nodded and continued the conversation while he moved to another group. My stepbrothers Mark and Tyler stood near the bar, both in expensive suits with that particular confidence of men who have never questioned their place in the world. Mark now worked as a loan officer at Riverdale Bank, while Tyler had taken over the local luxury car dealership. Both positions, I would later learn, came through Dad's business connections. I made my way to the bar, ordered a sparkling water, and attempted to mingle. Most guests either ignored me or gave me the curious looks reserved for people they couldn't quite place. "Are you with the catering staff?" one woman asked, eyeing my boots. "No, I'm Alexandra, Richard's daughter." "Oh, I didn't realize Richard had another child." "Just the two boys," I thought. "I'm his only biological child, actually. Mark and Tyler are my stepbrothers." "How interesting. And what do you do, dear?" Before I could answer, Diane announced it was time for speeches. Dad took center stage, champagne in hand, as guests gathered around. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this milestone with me," he began. 60 years seems impossible, but looking around at the life I've built, I couldn't be prouder. Success means nothing without people to share it with. He proceeded to thank Diane for making every day an adventure, praised Mark and Tyler for carrying on the family tradition of business excellence, and acknowledged key business associates who had been there from the beginning. Not once did he mention me. I stood in the back, invisible, as he credited everyone else for his happiness and success. When he finished to applause and raised glasses, I felt a hollowness expand inside me. Diane took the microphone next, gushing about how Richard's business connections had opened doors for their boys. She detailed Mark's promotion at the bank and Tyler's success with the dealership, attributing everything to Richard's mentorship. As I contemplated making a quiet exit, a man approached me with a look of pleasant surprise. "Alexandra Ward? I thought that was you." "Benjamin Chin. We met at the Urban Development Conference in Chicago last year. Your presentation on community-integrated spaces was brilliant." His voice carried in a momentary lull in conversation. Heads turned our way. "Mr. Chin, yes, I remember. You were considering implementing similar approaches in your Seattle project." "Indeed. And your suggestions saved us millions while increasing community support. But what brings Summit Development to Riverdale? Are you expanding your territory?" The room had gone oddly quiet, attention shifting to our conversation. Dad had frozen mid-sip, his champagne glass suspended. "Madam CEO, what brings Summit Development to Riverdale?" "Everyone, this is Alexandra Ward, one of the most innovative developers in the country," Benjamin continued enthusiastically, unaware of the tension suddenly filling the room. Eyes darted between Benjamin, me, and my father. Diane's smile had become a rigid mask. Mark and Tyler exchanged confused glances. In that moment of suspended animation, I made a decision. 10 years of being invisible. 10 years of achievements met with indifference. 10 years of politeness in the face of rejection. "What's the name of my company, Dad?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. He blinked rapidly, mouth opening and closing without sound. The silence stretched painfully. "Summit Development Group," I finally answered for him. "I'm here to finalize buying most of downtown." "I thought you'd know since it's been in the business news for months." The room erupted in murmurs. Benjamin looked between us, suddenly comprehending the situation. "Wait. Richard Ward is your father?" I had no idea. "Apparently, neither did he," I replied softly. The expression on my father's face cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been shame before settling into careful neutrality. Diane recovered first, social instincts kicking in as she glided to my side, arms slipping around my shoulders as if we had always been close. "Of course we are so proud of Alexandra. Such a driven girl, always was. She gets that from her father, you know. Richard always said she would go far with that determination." Her words rang hollow against the decade of indifference. Guests were watching the drama unfold with poorly concealed interest. Conversation suspended as all eyes tracked our family tableau. Mayor Roberts approached, hand extended. "Ms. Ward, I had no idea we had such a distinguished businesswoman with Riverdale roots. The council would love to hear your thoughts on our downtown revitalization efforts." Within minutes, I was surrounded by people who had ignored me earlier, now eager to make connections with the CEO of Summit Development. Business cards appeared from pockets, invitations to coffee meetings and golf games extended. Through it all, Dad remained at a distance, watching silently, champagne forgotten in his hand. Mark and Tyler approached cautiously, as if I might bite. Tyler spoke first, his salesman charm on full display. "Sis, this is incredible. You should have told us you were doing so well. We need to catch up. Actually, I've been thinking about expanding the dealership. Maybe you could give me some advice on commercial property development." Mark nodded eagerly. "The bank is always looking for solid investment opportunities. We should discuss potential partnerships while you're in town." I smiled politely but noncommittally. "I'm afraid my schedule is quite full with the downtown acquisition. Perhaps another time." Benjamin Chin, sensing the tension, deftly steered the conversation toward professional matters. "Alexandra, several business owners mentioned concerns about Crestview's aggressive tactics. Will Summit Development be taking a different approach?" Grateful for the lifeline, I outlined our community-centered development philosophy, emphasizing preservation of local businesses and creation of mixed-income housing. Several local business owners joined the conversation, expressing fears about being priced out of their locations. Summit Development believes that successful revitalization preserves a community's character while creating new opportunities, I explained. We partner with existing businesses rather than replacing them. Diane hovered nearby, continuously attempting to insert herself into these conversations with comments like, "Alexandra always did care about helping people," and "Our family has deep roots in Riverdale business." Each time, I politely acknowledged her before returning to substantive discussion. Throughout this impromptu business meeting, I was acutely aware of Dad watching from across the room, never approaching, never joining the conversation about the future of the town he had lived in his entire life. After an hour of networking that I had never anticipated, I made my excuses and prepared to leave. The model of Dad's first building project remained in its gift bag, undelivered. As I retrieved my coat, Diane intercepted me. "You really should have told us about your success, Alexandra. We would have planned a proper introduction for you. Perhaps featured you in Richard's birthday video. Would that have changed where I came in tonight, Diane?" I asked quietly. Her smile faltered. "That was just a misunderstanding. Your boots were quite muddy. They still are. Good night, Diane." It was an illuminating evening. I left through the front door, nodding to guests as I passed. My father remained across the room, our eyes meeting briefly before he looked away. Back at the Riverdale Inn, alone in my room, the carefully maintained composure finally cracked. Tears came in painful gasps as years of rejection crystallized in that one moment when Dad couldn't even name my company. All the success, all the achievements, all the wealth, none of it had changed how they saw me. I was still the awkward girl who didn't fit their image of family. Around midnight, my phone rang, Aunt Rebecca, Dad's younger sister who had moved to Arizona years ago. "Alexandra, I just heard what happened at the party. Nancy Roberts called me." "The mayor's wife? How did she get your number?" "Small town. Honey, listen, I'm sorry I wasn't there. Your father has always been stubborn to a fault, and Diane, well, let's just say she's protective of her position. Aunt Rebecca had always been kind to me, sending birthday cards and occasional emails, though distance had limited our relationship. Now her voice was a welcome connection to family that actually cared." He looked right through me. "Aunt Becca, like I was a stranger. Your father has always struggled with pride. Admitting he was wrong about your career would mean facing years of mistakes. It's not about you, Alexandra. It's about his inability to see beyond his own limited vision." We talked for nearly an hour, Rebecca filling in family context I had missed during my years away. Dad's construction business had been struggling for years, failing to adapt to changing markets. The grand house and lifestyle were largely funded by Diane's real estate commissions and family money. "Your success probably terrifies him," Rebecca concluded. "You've achieved what he couldn't, and did it without his help or approval." After our conversation, I made a decision. My original plan had been to attend the party and immediately return to my real life, but now I would stay in Riverdale longer. There was legitimate business potential in the downtown revitalization, but also personal business that needed resolution. Before sleeping, I wrote in the journal I had kept since college. Success was supposed to make me visible to them. Instead, It has revealed what I should have seen years ago. Their approval was never mine to earn because their limitations were never mine to fix. The question now is, do I still want what they cannot give? The next morning, I called my office to arrange working remotely for 2 weeks. Then I contacted Brian Harrison and asked him to gather local business owners for an informal meeting at his hardware store. By 10 a.m., the back room was filled with concerned faces: the bookstore owner, the diner manager, Mrs. Peterson from the inn, and a dozen others. "I'm not here to make promises," I began, "but I'd like to share Summit Development's vision for community revitalization and hear your concerns." Using my tablet, I showed examples of our previous projects: the converted factory with affordable artist lofts above street-level retail, the historic hotel renovated into senior housing with a community kitchen, the abandoned school transformed into a business incubator with shared resources. The buildings change, but our philosophy remains constant: preserve the soul of a community while creating sustainable economic opportunities. We believe development should serve existing residents, not displace them. Question after question followed, decades of anxiety pouring out. These business owners had watched neighboring towns either decay completely or gentrify beyond recognition. They feared both fates equally. Would rent increases force us out? Could we have input on new businesses coming in? What about the manufacturing district? Those buildings have been empty for 15 years. I answered honestly, outlining potential lease structures, community advisory boards, and phased development approaches. By meeting's end, the mood had shifted from suspicion to cautious optimism. Mrs. Peterson summarized the general feeling: "It sounds too good to be true, but your track record speaks for itself. We just want Riverdale to remain Riverdale, only better." After the meeting, I spent hours researching Riverdale's economic situation. The town had been declining since the textile factory closed in the early 2000s, with population dropping steadily as young people left for opportunities elsewhere. Crestview's approach, luxury condos and high-end retail, made no sense for a town with Riverdale's demographics unless they planned to completely replace the existing community. More concerning, I discovered that Dad's construction company was nearly bankrupt. They had bid on several Crestview subcontracts at below cost, desperate for work. Public records showed a second mortgage on the family home and tax liens against the business. I transformed my hotel suite into a temporary office, setting up my laptop and multiple screens. My team emailed property assessments, preliminary environmental reports, and financial projections for the Riverdale acquisition. Between conference calls and virtual meetings, I explored the town more thoroughly, photographing buildings and speaking with residents. 3 days after the birthday party, as I worked in my hotel suite, the front desk called to announce a visitor. Dad stood awkwardly in the lobby, looking older and more uncertain than at his party. "Alexandra, do you have a moment to talk?" We walked to the small garden behind the inn, sitting on a bench beneath an old oak tree. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. "Your mother would have been proud," he finally said, eyes fixed on the distance. "She always said you saw the world differently." The mention of Mom, rare from him, caught me off guard. "I was 9 when she died, Dad. I barely remember what she thought of me. She kept a folder of your drawings. Buildings, bridges, whole neighborhoods you designed. She called them Alexandra's futures. You never told me that." He shrugged uncomfortably. "After she died, it was easier not to remember some things." "Easier for you," I said quietly. "Not for me." The silence stretched between us again. Decades of unspoken words creating an almost physical barrier. "Why didn't you tell me about your company?" he finally asked. "I sent you press clippings when we won the Urban Renewal Award, a magazine feature when we completed the West Side project, Christmas cards with company updates every year. I thought you were just working for that development firm. I didn't realize that I owned it? That I built it from nothing? Would it have mattered, Dad? You directed me to the service entrance of your home." He flinched. "Diane thought, your clothes." "No." I cut him off firmly. "Don't blame Diane. You had a choice. You always had a choice about how to treat your daughter." Dad looked down at his hands. weathered from years of construction work despite his executive position. I didn't know how to raise a daughter alone. When Diane came along with the boys, it seemed simpler to focus on what I understood. You understood architecture, construction, building things, all the things I was interested in. Women didn't run construction companies in my experience. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment. You were protecting yourself from having to expand your worldview, I countered. It was never about my happiness. He had no response to that. And our conversation ended soon after, unresolved, but with cards at least on the table. The following evening, I organized a town hall meeting about Riverdale's development future. The community center was packed with residents eager to hear alternatives to Crestview's plans. I invited Dad privately, uncertain if he would attend. As I prepared my presentation, I spotted him slipping into a seat in the back row. Our eyes met briefly before I turned to the assembled crowd. For 90 minutes, I outlined Summit Development's community-centered approach, answered questions, and invited local input on priorities. Throughout, I was conscious of Dad watching as residents responded enthusiastically to my professional expertise and vision. Near the end, 3 men in expensive suits entered, Crestview executives I recognized from my research. They attempted to discredit my presentation, suggesting Summit Development lacked the resources for such an ambitious project and questioning our commitment to the community. Drawing on years of boardroom battles, I countered each point with specific financials, timelines, and case studies from our previous developments. When they claimed local contractors would lose work, I outlined our policy of hiring within the community whenever possible. In fact, I concluded, Riverdale has excellent construction expertise that we would be eager to partner with, provided they share our commitment to quality and fair labor practices. After the meeting, residents lingered to continue the conversation, many signing up for the community advisory board I proposed. Dad remained seated until the crowd thinned, then approached slowly. You handled those Crestview vultures masterfully, he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. I've been dealing with men who underestimate me for a long time. He nodded, absorbing the implicit criticism. Your approach makes more sense for Riverdale. Their plans would have priced out most residents within 5 years, including you, from what I understand about Ward Construction's finances. His head snapped up. You've been investigating my company? I research all potential partners thoroughly. Partners? Confusion and hope mingled in his expression. Summit often collaborates with local construction firms. We'll be accepting bids once the acquisition is finalized. The next day, I visited Ward Construction's offices, a modest building that had seen better days. Dad's secretary, Martha, who had known me since childhood, embraced me warmly before ushering me into his office. He seemed different here, more comfortable in his domain despite the visible signs of financial strain. Behind his desk hung framed photos of completed projects, awards from the Chamber of Commerce. And in the corner, partially hidden behind a filing cabinet, a framed article about Summit Development's West Side project with my photo. You kept track of my work, I observed. Dad shuffled papers nervously. I follow industry news. He opened his desk drawer and reluctantly removed a folder containing clippings of my projects, interviews, and press releases dating back to my first award at Greenfield Associates. I kept track of everything you did, he admitted quietly. Just couldn't admit I was wrong. We spent 2 hours reviewing Ward Construction's capabilities, current projects, and financial challenges. Beneath the surface conversation about business ran a deeper current of recognition, of seeing each other clearly perhaps for the first time. Summit could subcontract the historic preservation portions of the downtown project to Ward Construction, I suggested. Your experience with older buildings would be valuable. But there would be conditions. What conditions? His wariness was evident. Professional boundaries. No special treatment. Your company would need to meet our quality standards and timeline commitments. Our relationship would be strictly business until we both decide otherwise. And Diane? The boys? They are not part of this conversation. My relationship with them is separate from any business arrangement. He considered this. The implications of compartmentalizing family and business in a way he had never managed. Finally, he nodded. I can work with that. That evening, Diane called, her voice honey-sweet. Alexandra. Darling, Richard told me about your exciting project. We should have dinner to discuss how the family can support your vision. The boys are so eager to get involved. Thank you, Diane. But I've already established parameters with Dad. Summit Development will consider ward construction for specific components based solely on their qualifications. Any family relationships will remain separate from business decisions. Her tone cooled immediately. That seems unnecessarily formal. We're family after all. Are we? That wasn't clear when I was directed to the service entrance. You're being overly sensitive about a simple misunderstanding. Your appearance was concerning. And I was protecting Richard's image with his colleagues. My appearance reflected my work, the same work that now interests you because of its financial potential. I'm afraid I have another call. Good night, Diane. Instead of having dinner with Diane, I accepted Jessica's invitation to join her family. Her parents welcomed me warmly, and her husband and children treated me like an old friend. We talked about Riverdale's history, shared memories of high school, and discussed hopes for the town's future without a single mention of status or appearances. Later, I had dinner with Aunt Rebecca's daughter Emily and her family, who lived an hour away. These connections, genuine, uncomplicated by power dynamics or expectations, reminded me that family could be nurturing rather than diminishing. You seem different, Emily observed as we shared dessert. More settled somehow. I'm learning that success isn't measured by approval from people who cannot give it, I replied. And that family is sometimes who you choose rather than who you're born to. 6 months passed in a blur of activity. Summit Development completed the acquisition of 14 key properties in downtown Riverdale and the manufacturing district. I established a regular schedule of splitting my time between our headquarters and Riverdale, overseeing the initial phases of what would be a 5-year revitalization project. True to my word, Ward Construction received contracts for historic preservation work on 3 buildings after submitting competitive bids and detailed project plans. Dad's company hired additional staff and invested in equipment upgrades to meet our specifications. Our professional relationship developed a rhythm, weekly project meetings, site visits, and progress reports conducted with mutual respect. These structured interactions gradually built a foundation for something we had never had before, understanding. I saw Dad's genuine pride in craftsmanship, his knowledge of historical building techniques, his concern for his employees. He witnessed my leadership style, my attention to community impact, my ability to navigate complex stakeholder relationships. You remind me of your mother when you're presenting to the town council, he commented after one particularly challenging meeting where I had successfully negotiated a zoning variance. She had that same way of standing her ground while making others feel heard. Small personal revelations emerged during our professional conversations. I learned that Dad had kept my high school valedictorian speech in his wallet until it fell apart. He discovered that I had studied his early projects when developing my architectural approach. These fragments of connection didn't erase the past, but created possibility for something new. Diane maintained a cool civility during my increasingly frequent visits to Riverdale. She hosted necessary social functions related to the development project with perfect etiquette and minimal warmth. When business discussions arose, she would smile tightly and excuse herself. I respected the boundaries this created, neither seeking her approval nor allowing her disapproval to affect me. My stepbrothers presented a more complex evolution. Mark, after several transparent attempts to leverage our connection for banking opportunities, eventually settled into a professional relationship, referring clients with legitimate development interests. Tyler's car dealership benefited from the increased economic activity our first completed buildings generated, leading to a gradual thawing in his attitude. 3 months into the project, we completed renovation of the old mercantile building on Main Street, creating affordable retail spaces for local businesses on the ground floor with 4 apartments above. The grand reopening ceremony attracted the entire town. Mayor Roberts asked both Dad and me to cut the ribbon together. As camera flashes captured the moment, Dad spoke unplanned words that silenced the crowd. Riverdale is fortunate that Alexandra saw potential where others, including myself, saw only problems. Her vision for this community far exceeds what I imagined possible. I am proud of what Summit Development is creating here, and proud that my daughter is the driving force behind it. The public acknowledgement, delivered in front of the community that had witnessed my invisibility for years, marked a turning point. It wasn't a magical healing of all wounds, but an honest step toward something healthier. In private moments, I continued processing the complex emotions of our family history. During a walking tour of the textile factory renovation with Eleanor, who had come to visit the project, I confided my ongoing struggle. Part of me still wants his approval in a way that makes me angry at myself, I admitted. I'm a successful CEO who shouldn't need validation from someone who couldn't see my value. Eleanor, elegant as always even in a hard hat, considered this thoughtfully. Wanting recognition from a parent is human, Alexandra, not weakness. The growth isn't in stopping that desire, but in not letting it define your worth. How do I measure success then? Not just professionally, but personally? By building a life that honors your values rather than seeking approval that may never come in the form you want. Your father may never be the parent you deserved, but you can still create meaningful connection within those limitations. Her words helped me establish healthier expectations for family relationships. I stopped looking for the perfect reconciliation moment and instead appreciated the small improvements. Dad asking my opinion on design choices, sharing memories of Mom I had never heard. Making space for my professional authority. I developed unexpected connections in Riverdale beyond my family. Jessica and I established a weekly coffee meeting that became a genuine friendship. Brian Harrison joined Summit's Community Advisory Board, bringing valuable historical perspective. Mrs. Peterson at the inn became a surrogate grandmother figure, sharing town gossip and wisdom in equal measure. For the Thanksgiving holiday, 6 months after that fateful birthday party, I received an invitation to dinner at the family home. My immediate instinct was wariness, memories of past disappointments surfacing. But I accepted, bringing a bottle of wine and a professionally neutral attitude. The dynamics had shifted subtly. Dad greeted me at the door himself, taking my coat with uncharacteristic attentiveness. Diane's perfectionism remained, but her competitive edge had softened slightly. Mark and Tyler, while not warm, maintained polite conversation without angling for business advantages. When we gathered at the dining table, laden with traditional dishes, Dad surprised everyone by asking me to say grace, a role previously reserved for the man of the house in their traditional view. I'm grateful for new beginnings, I said simply, and for the chance to build something lasting, both in brick and in relationships. Throughout dinner, I observed how family patterns had evolved. Dad regularly directed questions to me about the development project, giving my answers his full attention. Diane still attempted to center conversations around the boys' achievements, but with less desperation. A tentative new balance was emerging. After dessert, Dad invited me to his study, a space I had rarely been welcome in as a child. On his desk sat the architectural model I had commissioned for his birthday, finally delivered. Your first commercial project, I explained. The Riverside Professional Building. He examined the detailed miniature, emotion flickering across his face. You remembered every detail. Even the custom railings. It was the first building I ever really studied. I used to ride my bike there after school and sketch it from different angles. I never knew that. You never asked. The simple truth hung between us, not as accusation but as acknowledgement. As I prepared to leave, Dad walked me to the front door. A small but meaningful gesture given our history. Will you come for Christmas? He asked, uncertainty making him seem older. I have plans with friends in the city for Christmas Eve, but I could come for Christmas Day, I offered. Maintaining boundaries while allowing connection. We would like that, he said, and for once, I believed him. Walking through downtown Riverdale the next morning, I passed buildings in various stages of transformation. Scaffolding and construction barriers marked spaces of possibility. Local contractors worked alongside Summit's team, creating something that honored the past while building toward a sustainable future. In many ways, it mirrored my personal journey, preserving what was valuable from my history while constructing something healthier moving forward. The family I had craved for so long might never take the exact form I had imagined, but new relationships and strengthened connections created a different kind of belonging. I established a scholarship program for young women interested in construction and development, ensuring that other girls with architecture dreams would find support rather than dismissal. When the first recipient was selected, a high school senior with detailed sketches of community housing, Dad attended the award ceremony without being asked. Success, I realized, wasn't proving my worth to people who had failed to see it. Success was creating spaces, both physical and emotional, where worth was recognized inherently. It was using my position to hold doors open that had once been closed to me. It was building foundations strong enough to support not just buildings, but people. As I walked through the front door of the Ward family home for the next holiday dinner, the symbolism wasn't lost on me. The journey from back entrance to front door, from invisible daughter to respected professional, from seeking approval to setting boundaries, these transformations had built something more valuable than any building in my portfolio. What defines a true family? Is it shared DNA or shared values? Is success measured by others' recognition or by the lives you touch? If you've ever felt invisible in the places you should have belonged most, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Sometimes our greatest strength comes from building something new from the foundation of what hurt us. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to remember their worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. Thank you for walking this path with me today.